Starwalker Studios presents Game Master's Journey, your multidimensional RPG podcast. Hello, fellow gamer. Welcome to episode 189 of Game Master's Journey. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker. On this show, we discuss the craft and the art of game mastering. I've been running RPGs for over 26 years now, and I produce this show in the hopes that you can benefit from my experience, my triumphs, and my mistakes. Today, I'm going to be digging in once again to Xanathar's Guide to Everything. So this is the second episode in this series. The first episode, I gave you an overview of what you can find within the pages of this tome. And today I'm going to be talking about what they did in Xanathar's Guide with tool proficiencies. And this was an area of the game that I think there was a lot of confusion among many GMs, and a lot of us, I think, were underutilizing the tool proficiencies at our table to the point where players tended to see them as practically useless. And I know I've heard that more than once from players. So Xanathar's Guide gives us some ideas on how to make tool proficiencies much more useful and interesting, and I think will add a lot to your campaign if you haven't been doing these things already. But before we get into that today, before we crack open Xanathar's Guide, there are some other things that I want to discuss with you here at the top of the show. First of all, I do have some announcements to make. First of all, I want to give a shout out and a thank you to our new patron, Lee. Thank you so much for joining the esteemed ranks of the patrons, Lee. I really appreciate it. I've been getting some questions about various things in regards to the podcast feed and the Patreon feed and how this all works. So I thought really quickly today, I just go over a few things that I hear about often from people who are a little confused about what's going on. So when it comes to the public free feed for the podcast, which you're probably subscribed to right now for Game Master's Journey, that feed only contains the most recent episodes of Game Master's Journey. My hosting provider actually limits my RSS feed to 100 episodes, so I couldn't have more than 100 episodes in the feed if I wanted to. And you know, really the purpose of an RSS feed is to keep you up to date with the most recent content. It's not really intended to be an archive of every episode of a podcast that's been going for as long as Game Master's Journey has. Really, the feed is there for people to enjoy for free. So there is another feed that you can subscribe to other than the free public feed, and that is a feed available to patrons. When you become a patron of Starwalker Studios, you get access to a private RSS feed, and that feed includes, among other things, the archived episodes of Game Master's Journey. So right now, with a few exceptions that I have in as bonuses right now, the main feed, the public feed, starts with episode 100. So, you know, if you want to hear the first 100 episodes of the show, you can do so by becoming a patron and subscribing to that new private feed, and then you'll be able to get all of those episodes. Now, currently, the way I'm doing it is the patron feed on Patreon doesn't have all the most recent episodes. So it does have some of them, but the purpose of the Patreon feed is for episodes that are not available free in the public feed. So the most recent episodes are not in the patron feed, and that's by design. Because again, the patron feed is for episodes that have been archived, to put it another way, have been put behind a paywall, partly because I can only have 100 episodes in my feed, and and today we're on episode 189. So there's more than 100 episodes in the history of Game Master's Journey. So you can get access to that private feed and get access to the back episodes as a tier 1 patron, which is $5 a month. Also, another thing I get a lot of questions about is people ask about my player's guide that I'm working up for my Hinterlands of Elandria campaign. I hear from a lot of people that they would love to take a look at that. And right now, patrons at the tier 2 level, which is $10 a month, get access to my Primordia design diary, where I upload various things that I homebrew for Primordia. And I have been releasing parts of my player's guide to the patrons in the Primordia Design Diary on a kind of chapter by chapter basis, and I will continue to do so. So if you're really wanting to see that, you can become a patron at the tier 2 level, and you can check all that out. Now, I am kicking around the idea of someday maybe publishing the player's guide. I'm continuing to add to it and refine it and things like that. And if it gets to the point that I feel like there's enough there that it's something that people might be interested in, then I may publish it and put it up for sale on the website at starwalkerstudios.com. So that's another possible avenue for you, but I don't know if or when that will actually happen. So yeah, so I think that addresses some of the more common questions I get about the Patreon, and you can check out our Patreon at patreon.com/StarWalkerStudios, or you can just click the Patreon button at the top of the show notes for any episodes or any of the episodes at StarWalkerStudios.com. Also, while we're doing announcements, I want to let you know that you can still get Game Master's Journey and Star Walker Studios and Trickster's Labyrinth t-shirts over on Spreadshirt. And they are actually having a promotion from November 14th to November 19th, 2017, where you can get free standard shipping on your order. You just use the coupon code JOY2017. That's JOY 2017. And I will put that code in the show notes. So if you've been thinking about getting a t-shirt or something else, now's a great time to do so because you can get free shipping. Also want to remind you, if you want to connect with other listener GMs, we have a Game Master's Journey community on Google+, as well as a Star Walker Studios server on Discord. And you can find links to both of those in the show notes as well at starwalkerstudios.com. And finally, my new D&D campaign, Hinterlands of Elandria, which I am live streaming, will be live streaming again on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And you can check that out on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarWalkerStudios. And check out our actual play. I'm also producing videos called Behind the Screen, in which I talk about preparing and running the campaign. And I've been adding those to the podcast feed in an audio format, but those are originally produced as YouTube videos. So if you'd like to see the video, those are part of the Hinterlands of Elandria playlist on YouTube. All right. And finally, before we move on to Xanathar's guide, I got a bit of feedback that I would like to share with you. And this is from Jacques in South Africa. So cool that I have, I have a few listeners that I know of in South Africa. Very cool. Jacques says, I'm a regular listener to your Game Master's Journey podcast, which has been my number one stop for GMing advice and tips. Awesome. That's so great to hear. Thank you. With regards to your current weekly game, and in response to what you said in episode 184 about whether to make an audio-only format of your game, I'll just add my 2 cents and say I'd love it if you made the sessions available in some kind of podcast app-friendly format. That's pretty much the only way I listen to online streams. I just don't have the time to sit down and watch a session, so I tend to listen piecemeal while on the move or doing the dishes. Yeah, you know what? I know that's true for a lot of people, and that's actually true for me personally. I never watched much Critical Role until they started releasing it in a podcast form where I could listen to it while I was driving. And then suddenly I could find time for it. So I know, Jacques, you're not alone. I know there's a lot of people that just don't have time to sit at their computer and watch YouTube all day and much prefer podcast format. And I would love to release the campaign in a podcast. I'd love to do that. There's just a couple things with that. First of all, we are playing online. So there's very little I can do about the sound quality, especially of the players. I mean, I can control my own sound quality because I'm recording that directly. But as far as the players' audio, first of all, I have no control over what kind of microphone or whatever they're using. And second, that audio is coming to me over the internet, which tends to degrade it, sometimes more than others. So it's difficult, sometimes impossible, to get decent audio quality from the recording of an online game session. And people are far less forgiving of subpar audio when it's an audio only format than they are when they're watching a video on YouTube. So that's one issue. The other issue is that producing an audio version would require an extensive amount of additional editing and production. It's not just so simple as taking the audio from the YouTube video and posting that as a podcast. I mean, I could do that, but and if people really want me to, I can give it a shot, but you probably won't be very happy with the results. It really takes a lot more time to take that audio and get it to something that you'd actually want to listen to in your car or in earbuds and things like that. And that's just something as an aside about the podcast animal is one of the reasons audio quality is so important. And those of you who listen to audio actual play podcasts, you'll probably know exactly what I'm talking about, is that people listen to these in all kinds of different situations. And if you're listening in a quiet room, you may be fine, but people are listening on headsets or earbuds while they're working or while they're using machinery or doing yard work. So there may be noises around them. People listen on their car sound systems while they're driving, and then you've got road noise and things like that. So audio quality is even more important, and things like having the audio properly balanced and normalized, which is to say everyone's audio is the same volume. You don't have one player that's super soft and one player that's super loud. I've heard so many actual play podcasts that have these problems, and they're pretty much impossible to listen to, for instance, while you're driving, because you're turning up your volume all the way to hear the super soft player and you can still not really hear them very well. And then the loud player talks and blows out your speakers and your ears, and you're constantly fiddling with the knob. So if you find yourself listening to a podcast and you find yourself constantly fiddling with the volume knob, that's a sign of a podcast that's not appropriately mastered and balanced and normalized and all that good stuff. And all that stuff takes time to do. Also, our videos are live streamed, so the videos are unedited. So, there's off-topic conversations. We often take a break at some point, and all that is part of the live stream video. And people don't so much mind that with a live stream video because it's just part of it being a live stream video. But if I were going to produce a podcast, I would need to edit all that stuff out because people would get really annoyed with all that crap in a podcast. So to boil this down, it really comes down to a thing of time. It would take a lot of time to do, time that I don't have right now, and time that I would have to find from somewhere. So the reason I'm bringing this up on the show is I have heard from a few people, not many, but a few people who've said, like Jacques, that they would really appreciate an audio version of the actual play. So if you're one of those people, let me know. Shoot me an email, gamemastersjourney@gmail.com. You can tweet me on Twitter @LexStarWalker, or drop a comment in our Google community or Discord server and let me know. But to be completely honest and realistic, if I did this, I would probably add it as a milestone for the Patreon, because again, this would take a lot of time and it would be quite a commitment to say I'm going to do this with every actual play episode for as long as we play. And that time has to come from somewhere. So, if there's enough interest that I think we might actually hit a stretch goal, I could make it a stretch goal on the Patreon. But, we would have to hit that stretch goal because, we're talking probably 3 to 4 hours of editing and production per hour of actual play time. So, we play 3 hours a week. So you're talking, probably somewhere around 12 hours of editing that I have to find from somewhere. So yeah, let me know if you're interested. But ultimately, unfortunately, just reality. If you really want this, it's going to be one of those things where you're going to have to probably put your money where your mouth is, for me to be able to do that. But I would love to do it. If we can make that happen, that'd be awesome. And I don't know, maybe we could make even higher stretch goals on the Patreon, where I can get the players good microphones to make them sound as good as possible. But in all honesty, the lack of fidelity on the player's end has a lot more to do with it being done over the internet than the particular microphone that they're using. All right, so back to Jock's email. Let's see. He says, also an idea for future podcasts. I love the way you worked through the player's handbook and are busy going through the Dungeon Master's Guide. Your discussions of hiding during combat, the disadvantage dark vision characters get when seeing in total darkness, taking an action to drink potions, death saves, and much else besides has been immensely invaluable for helping balance my game. Thank you so much. I'm glad those are helpful to you. And I hear from a lot of people that feel in similar ways. I love the attention you give to these core books and wondered if you'd ever consider doing an in-depth reading of the Monster Manual, perhaps even Volo's Guide. If not the entire thing, at least monsters that you love or feel deserve more love. It'd be great to hear memorable scenarios you've run in the past and advice you'd give on how to make the most of these monsters. Thanks again for a great podcast. Looking forward to following your current campaign as it advances from week to week. Thank you so much, Jock. I really appreciate your email. Yeah, I would totally consider discussing the Monster Manual and Volo's Guide, and I am going to discuss at least parts of Xanathar's Guide, at least the DM stuff, which this episode is part of that discussion. But yeah, I'd be willing to do that. I could even see doing a segment, maybe not on every episode, but occasionally doing a segment where I do exactly what you talk about. I take a monster from the Monster Manual or Volo's Guide and talk about it, how you can use it in your game, what I like about it, talk about fiddly mechanics with it that people may get confused by or may forget in the heat of the moment. Things like that I'd love to do. So if you're listening to this and you dig that, let me know monsters you'd like to hear about. I think the most likely way that this will happen is if I hear from listeners that say something like, hey, Lex, I'd love to hear you talk about stone golems or something like that. Because honestly, the most difficult part of that would be deciding what monsters to talk about because there's so many. And I'd rather talk about the monsters that you want me to talk about. So yeah, I can totally do that. So if you're listening to this and there's a certain monster you'd like to hear talked about, let me know. All right. Well, that does it for our top of the show goodness. And without further ado, let's go ahead and go into our main segment. All right, so today for our main topic, we are going to talk some about Xanathar's Guide to Everything. And the last time I talked to you about this book, I just cracked it open and kind of skimmed through it and hadn't really read much of it in detail. So today I finally got through a lot of it, and As I was reading through it, there was a section I definitely wanted to talk with you because I was really impressed with what Wizards did, and that's the bit on tool proficiencies. But before we get to tool proficiencies, I did have some feedback on Xanathar's guide specifically. I asked on Twitter and in the Discord channel and on our Google Plus community if anyone had any questions about Xanathar's guide or anything they wanted me to talk about. And Golart, not sure if I'm saying that right, says on Discord that something they're interested in is my point of view about players that are in long-lasting campaigns and have the urge to suicide their character in the next session in order to try all the new flavors in Xanathar's guide. Golar asks, what are some ways that I would deal with that? So, yeah, that can be a real pain. And I've seen this happen before in my games. Players chasing the new shiny thing, right? So a new source book comes out. There's some new maybe class or subclass or some new thing that a player really likes. And suddenly they're very enamored with this shiny new thing and they don't want to play their character anymore. They want to make a new character using this new thing. So those of you listening who only play RPGs and don't run RPGs as a GM may be wondering, well, who cares? What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that the GM may have plans for this character. I know as a GM, I like to pull in things from character backgrounds and develop arcs for each of the player characters. And as a GM, if I have all these things planned that I'm going to do with your character and for your character in the future of the campaign, and the new shiny thing comes and you want to ditch this character and make a new one, that's a little frustrating for me, because it's like, well, basically all that time I put into your character is just going down the toilet now, and now you've got a brand new character, and now I'm supposed to put that time into this new character that I already put into the other one. So this can be frustrating to say the least for the GM, and chances are good, if your GM's a human being, which probably is, that your GM is going to be at least a little less willing, if not a lot less willing, to put much time into this new character, developing it and working it into the story. Because who knows when you're going to go off chasing the next new shiny thing that comes out, right? Every time a new book comes out, you want to make a new character. And I've seen players like this. This isn't just imaginary. So, as a player, I guess, think about that. Think about your GM and what your GM has put into your character and into the story, much of which you probably have no idea of because it's things coming later in the campaign. And, maybe think about your GM a little bit. So if you're the GM and this is something you're dealing with because of Xanathar's guide or whatever else the new supplement is for your game, and you have players wanting to just scrap their character and make a new one, or wanting to get their character killed so they can make a new one, and you see this as undesirable, here are a few ways I thought of to handle this. First of all, just don't allow new characters. You can just say, no, you can't just abandon the character you're playing and make a new character. You made a character for this campaign. This is the character you made. This is the character you're going to play. You can just draw a line in the sand. Now, of course, the player could try to sidestep that or try to find a loophole by, I'm just going to do really suicidal things and try to get my character killed so that I can then make a new character. If that's your player's response to that, I'd say that you've got bigger problems with this player than this, and you should probably deal with those problems. But just saying it's not allowed may solve it for you. Another thing you can do instead of or in addition to that, and this is something I usually do in campaigns, is have some kind of tax on players who make new characters, whether they just decide I'm going to retire this character and make a new character, or their character gets killed. So what do you mean by tax, you ask? Well, something like something very common. It says if your character dies and you make a new character, or you just want to make a new character, that new character is going to start one level lower than the lowest level player character in the party. So let's say you've got your player characters are all 4th and 5th level, and this player wants to scrap their character and make a new character. Well, that character is going to start out at 3rd level, one level below the lowest other character. A lot of times that will be enough to dissuade a player from doing this, because what I've noticed in my experience, and your experience may be different, but in my experience, it seems like it's the power gamer and the munchkin players that are most susceptible to this. And oftentimes what's really attracting to them, or what's really attractive to them about this new option, is that it's powerful, right? Because as games expand, as they add more and more supplements, you have this tendency of power creep, which is to say that the new options tend to be more powerful than the original options in the core book, whatever game that was. So players will figure this out and they'll be like, oh, hey, this new subclass is more powerful than the subclasses given in the player's handbook. I want to play this thing. So if there's attacks where their character is actually going to be a lower level than the other characters, at least to start out, it kind of short circuits that a little bit, because it's like, well, you're not really going to be min-maxing or power gaming much, because your class is maybe more powerful now, but that's balanced by the fact that you're now a level or two lower than you were before, or even lower than that, depending how much variation you have among your player characters of what level they are. I often assume that the player characters are all either the same level or within a level of each other, but you might have a group where you have one player character that's 3rd level and another one that's 8th level. And that means that new character is going to be a 2nd level character. So that's just one example of attacks. You could come up with other ones. You can also consider starting equipment. And I found that the guidelines given in, I believe it's in the player's handbook, for starting equipment. No, it's in the Dungeon Master's Guide for starting equipment above 1st level characters. I found those they work really well. They're not overpowered. If anything, they're a little underpowered, but it does let you, if you have a higher level character, they can start with some extra gold maybe, or maybe a magic item or something like that. So another way you could approach this is not doing that with the new character. Be like, hey, you get the starting equipment. That's it. You're not going to get like free magic items. You're certainly not going to get the equipment that your other character had. So those are a couple ideas as far as how to keep players from doing this if they want to do this. But there's some other ways you could approach it too. Another thing you could do is that you or someone else in your group could run a one-shot or some other shorter adventure where everybody can try the new options and make new characters and play this short adventure before you return back to the ongoing campaign you've been doing. And especially if someone else runs that other than you, then that gives you some time off that you can just play the game, have some fun, recharge your creative batteries, and come up with stuff for the next adventure. It gives you some lead time. So, I think that would honestly be the best way to handle it if that'll work for your group. And if that'll do it for the player, it's like, okay, I got to try this new thing for a couple sessions and now I'm good. I can go back to my character I've been developing for a long time now. So if that works for your group, especially if someone else can GM it other than you, I think that might be the best solution. Another thing you can do, and I highly recommend this, is implement as many of the new options from the new thing as you can into the existing characters. So maybe it doesn't have to be a thing of the player has to make a brand new character to use the new shiny thing they want to use. Maybe they can use it with the character they already have. So for instance, a PC could maybe multi-class and do a new class if that's what they're wanting. Or the next time they level up, they can choose spells and feats from the new options if that's what they're after. So see if there's a way that you can give the player what they want with the character that they already have. And most importantly, and finally, I think discuss this together as a group, not just with this one player, but as an entire group, because the one player that you hear from may not be the only player that's having these thoughts and these desires. If you have players wanting to change characters, discuss it with them and explain where you're coming from. Explain your hesitance or your reluctance to do that, or why you don't want to do that. Tell them, hey, I've put hours and hours into developing things for your characters from your backstory that's going to come into play. And if you switch characters on me, all that's for nothing. And I'm only human. I'm not going to be super motivated to do it again for your new character. Especially if I have multiple players doing that. I mean, I could easily see a GM, like you have 4 players and 2 of the players want to do this. The GM just being like, I don't even want to run this campaign anymore. I mean, yeah, that's not going to be good for anybody. So, talk about it as a group. See if you can figure out a solution together that will make everybody happy. And at the very least, get everyone on the same page. All right. So today I am talking about a little section, a few pages here from Xanathar's Guide to Everything called Tools and Skills Together. Actually, I guess it's a few sections, but this is all about tool proficiencies. And I've seen so much confusion about tool proficiencies. Everything from, when do I use thieves' tools? When do I use sleight of hand? To what ability do I use with thieves' tools? Is it dexterity? Is it intelligence? What do I do? Also, what does having proficiency in land vehicles really mean? What can I do with that? And so what this section does is it gives us much more information as far as what a given tool proficiency can do. Goes right down into when you buy those tools, what exactly you're getting, what's in your toolkit specifically, and gives us some ways to make them more useful in the game. And this section really excited me when I read it, and I instantly started thinking about the character that I play in Brett's game and the tool proficiencies he has, and was very excited about these new things that I can do with my tool proficiencies. So, and just to go back a little bit to what we were just discussing, this is an example of something you can implement into a campaign. You don't need to start your campaign over or say, hey, when we start the next campaign, we'll do this thing. You can start doing it now. And so if your character, like my character, suddenly can do these things that you didn't know they could do before, it's just something you haven't done before. Your character could always do that. It just, for whatever reason, it hasn't come up in the story before. And so things like this, you can just implement into an ongoing campaign right now. It's not a problem. All right, so let's see what the book has to say here about tools and skills together. So this is on page 78 on Xanathar's Guide, if you have the book. So it says, tool proficiencies are a useful way to highlight a character's background and talents. At the game table, though, the use of tools sometimes overlaps with the use of skills, and it can be unclear how to use them together in certain situations. This section offers various ways that tools can be used in the game. Tools and skills together. Tools have more specific applications than skills. The history skill applies to any event in the past. A tool such as a forgery kit is used to make fake objects and little else. Thus, why would a character who has the opportunity to acquire one or the other want to gain a tool proficiency instead of a proficiency in a skill? And see, that's part of the problem, as a lot of us have been running the game up to this point, is players perceive tools as much less valuable than skills when it comes to proficiencies, when they're choosing proficiencies. So, that's not necessarily a good thing, right? Ideally, players would see tools as equal value to skills. To make tool proficiencies more attractive choices for the characters, you can use the methods outlined below. Advantage. If the use of a tool and the use of a skill both apply to a check, and a character is proficient with the tool and the skill, consider allowing the character to make the check with advantage. This simple benefit can go a long way toward encouraging players to pick up tool proficiencies. In the tool descriptions that follow, this benefit is often expressed as additional insight or something similar, which translates into an increased chance that the check will be a success. So that's something that they do with all of the tools. They go through here and they give suggestions for ways that that tool could be used with various skill checks. Added benefit. In addition, consider giving characters who have both a relevant skill and a relevant tool proficiency an added benefit on a successful check. This benefit might be in the form of more detailed information, or it could simulate the effect of a different sort of successful check. For example, a character proficient with Mason's tools makes a successful wisdom perception check to find a secret door in a stone wall. Not only does the character notice the door's presence, but you decide that the tool proficiency in Mason's tools entitles the character to an automatic success on an intelligent investigation check to determine how to open the door. So that's pretty cool. And like I said, they're going to go through all the tools and give you examples of how to do this, but you can easily come up with even more examples during play on the fly.
This is Matthew Colville, and you're listening to Game Master's Journey.
I want to take a minute to give a quick shout out to the patrons of Starwalker Studios. The support of the patrons makes this show possible. If you enjoy Game Master's Journey and you'd like to give a little back, becoming a patron is a great way to do so. It's because of the patrons that all the listeners of Game Master's Journey enjoy a bonus episode every month, as well as the monthly Game Master's Journey live stream. I'd also like to give a huge shout out and thank you to my Tier 5 patron, Steve. Let's hear it for Steve.
Yeah.
Yes.
You the man.
Thank you so much, Steve, and thank you to all the patrons. You can find out more about becoming a patron by clicking on the Patreon button at the top of the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com. All right, so now we have a discussion of what we're going to talk about with the various tools. So one thing we're going to discuss is components. The first paragraph in each description gives details on what a set of supplies or tools is made up of. I love this. Anything that can be more descriptive is good in my mind. It's much better to say, oh, I have this toolkit, which means I have these specific objects, as opposed to just, I have this abstract toolkit and none of us really know what it is. A character who is proficient with a tool knows how to use all of its component parts. Skills. Every tool potentially provides advantage on a check when used in conjunction with certain skills, provided a character is proficient with the tool and the skill. As a DM, you can allow a character to make a check using the indicated skill with advantage. Paragraphs that begin with skill names discuss these possibilities. In each of these paragraphs, the benefits apply only to someone who has a proficiency with the tool, not someone who simply owns it. So that's really important. You got to be proficient. Just having the tool in your possession isn't enough. With respect to skills, the system is mildly abstract in terms of what a tool proficiency represents. Essentially, it assumes that a character who has proficiency with a tool also has learned about facets of the trade or profession that are not necessarily associated with the use of the tool. In addition, you can consider giving a character extra information or an added benefit on a skill check. The text provides some examples and ideas when this opportunity is relevant. We then have a special use. Proficiency with a tool usually brings with it a particular benefit in the form of a special use, as described in this paragraph. And then sample DCs. So each of these will give a little table with some DCs of some common things that you might do with that tool, which is going to be very helpful in running the game. All right, now I don't know if we're going to have time to go through all of these today. Probably not. So I'll probably just go through a few examples to give you an idea of what we're adding here. Maybe I'll go through some of my favorites, and then you'll have to get a hold of Xanathar's guide to get the whole story. All right, so let's talk first about alchemist supplies. This one's pretty interesting. Alchemist supplies enable a character to produce useful concoctions, such as acid or alchemist fire. Components. So this is going to tell us what is actually in alchemist supplies. When you buy that for your character, what are you getting? Alchemist supplies include 2 glass beakers, a metal frame to hold a beaker in place over an open flame. Did I say metal flame? Let me try that again. I think I screwed that up. A metal frame to hold a beaker in place over an open flame, a glass stirring rod, a small mortar and pestle, and a pouch of common alchemical ingredients, including salt, powdered iron, and purified water. So that's what's in the alchemist supplies. Now we know. So now we're going to have some thoughts given for some different skills you could use with alchemist supplies, starting with Arcana. Proficiency with alchemist supplies allows you to unlock more information on Arcana checks involving potions and similar materials. Investigation. When you inspect an area for clues, proficiency with alchemist supplies grants additional insight into any chemicals or other substances that might have been used in the area. So, something that occurs to me as we discuss this here is, as a player, I really recommend when you're making a check that you remind the dungeon master of any tools that you have proficiency in that you think might apply to this check, because your dungeon master is most likely not going to be able to remember what every player character's proficiencies are in skills and tools. So, I'm 100% with Matt Colville, who often says that he thinks it's a player's responsibility to understand how their character works and to be able to give that information to the DM when required. And I completely agree with that. So if you're going to cast a spell as a player, you should know what that spell does. You should have looked it up, and you should be able to answer my questions about it. Like, what's the save? What's the DC for the save? What does the spell do? Does it have material components? Things like that. Like, if the DM has to do all of that, your game is going to grind to a halt. So it's good for players to take responsibility for their characters and what their characters can do. So, when you're making a check, don't be afraid to remind your DM, hey, I have this skill. Can I use this skill for the check? Or, hey, I have this tool proficiency. Will this apply to the check at all? So don't be afraid to do that. All right. So now we talk about alchemical crafting, which is probably why most of us are taking alchemy supplies, if we are. You can use this tool proficiency to create alchemical items. A character can spend money to collect raw materials, which weigh 1 pound for every 50 gold pieces spent. So for some reason, this sentence threw me for a minute and I had to figure out what they were trying to say. So basically what they're saying is you go out and you go shopping for the things that you need to make the alchemical stuff you want to make. I mean, the way they word the sentence, it makes it sound like you're going out foraging for supplies, but then for some reason you have to pay for them. So I think what they're really saying here is you're buying these alchemical supplies from other, from merchants and whatnot. And you're basically, they're simplifying it to you just pay 50 gold pieces for every pound of supplies. And we're not going to worry about specifically what those supplies are. So the way you would track this on your character sheet is you would spend the 50 gold and write under your equipment 1 pound of alchemical supplies or however many pounds you buy. And then as you use those to make things, you just subtract from that. The DM can allow a character to make a check using the indicated skill with advantage. As part of a long rest, you can use alchemist supplies to make 1 dose of acid, alchemist fire, antitoxin, oil, perfume, or soap. Subtract half the value of the created item from the total gold piece worth of raw materials you are carrying. Oh, okay. So I guess on your character sheet, maybe it'd be better to just say how much gold you spent. I guess they're going to break this down by cost and not by weight. So I spent 50 gold for a pound of alchemical supplies. The pound of supplies doesn't really matter unless you're using encumbrance or you're tracking carrying capacity. But otherwise, I guess what you really need to know is I spent 50 gold on alchemical supplies. All right, so then we have a table here that gives us some examples. So you can create a puff of thick smoke with a DC 10, DC 10 to identify a poison, DC 15 to identify a substance, DC 15 to start a fire, and DC 20 to neutralize acid. So there you go. There's some things you can do with alchemist supplies. Pretty cool stuff. Next, we'll talk about another favorite of mine, brewer's supplies. Brewing is the art of producing beer. Not only does beer serve as an alcoholic beverage, but the process of brewing purifies water. Crafting beer takes weeks of fermentation, but only a few hours of work. I would also add that brewing wine and mead and cider use very similar processes, and I would personally allow a player character who had brewer supplies to make any of those alcoholic beverages, because as someone who homebrews myself, now wine's a little bit of a different animal, but beer, cider, and mead are all very similar to make. And wine's not that much difference. As abstract as we are in D&D, wine could easily fit into that too. Components. Brewer's supplies include a large glass jug, a quantity of hops, a siphon, and several feet of tubing. So here are some skills that you could use brewer's supplies with. History. And I love some of these that aren't immediately obvious. I love that they went to this level of detail. So history. Proficiency with brewer's supplies gives you additional insult on intelligence history checks. Did I just say additional insult? What is with me today? Let's try that again. Proficiency with brewer's supplies gives you additional insight on intelligence history checks concerning events that involve alcohol as a significant element. Medicine. This tool proficiency grants additional insight when you treat anyone suffering from alcohol poisoning or when you can use alcohol to dull pain. Persuasion. A stiff drink can help soften the hardest heart. Your proficiency with brewer's supplies can help you ply someone with drink, giving them just enough alcohol to mellow their mood. So it's not just that you're giving them the stuff you made, it's that you have such an understanding of alcohol that you know exactly how much to give them to get them to that mental, emotional state that you want, where, you know, they've been socially lubricated, but they didn't drink so much that they're incoherent. Potable water. So this is a special thing you can do with brewing supplies. Your knowledge of brewing enables you to purify water that would otherwise be undrinkable. As part of a long rest, you can purify up to 6 gallons of water or 1 gallon as part of a short rest. So that's pretty cool stuff, right? And for someone like me, for instance, who homebrews, you might come up with that and be like, hey, you know, now that I think about it, I could probably purify water, or you might not. For instance, I never really thought of that, and I homebrew. So really cool stuff. So again, we're given some sample DCs using brewer supplies. So you can detect poison or impurities in a drink with a DC 10. You can identify alcohol with a DC 15, and you can ignore the effects of alcohol with a DC 20. All right, next we have calligrapher's supplies. I'm not going to discuss that one. I'll let you look that one up, but good stuff for calligrapher's supplies. Next we have carpenter's tools, and I'll talk about this one because this is one of the ones that involves being able to craft things, which is super cool. Skill at carpentry enables a character to construct wooden structures. A carpenter can build a house, a shack, a wooden cabinet, or similar items. Components. Carpenter's tools include a saw, a hammer, nails, a hatchet, a square, a ruler, an adze, a plane, and a chisel. So here are some ways you could use carpenter's tools with various skills. History. This tool proficiency aids you in identifying the use and the origin of wooden buildings and other large wooden objects. That's pretty cool. Investigation. You gain additional insight when investigating areas within wooden structures because you know tricks of construction that can conceal areas from discovery. That's pretty cool. Perception. You can spot irregularities in wooden walls or floors, making it easier to find trapdoors and secret passages. Stealth. You can quickly assess the weak spots in a wooden floor, making it easier to avoid the places that creak and groan when they're stepped on. Now that's awesome, and that is something I would probably never think of, at least as a DM. A player might think of it if they're trying to think of some way to leverage their carpentry knowledge, but that's super cool. Fortify. Oh, so now we're into special things you can do with carpentry. So fortify. With 1 minute of work and raw materials, you can make a door or window harder to force open. Increase the DC needed to open it by 5. Sweet. Temporary shelter. As part of a long rest, you can construct a lean-to or similar shelter to keep your group dry and in the shade for the duration of the rest. Because it was fashioned quickly from whatever wood was available, the shelter collapses 1 to 3 days after being assembled. And then we have some example DCs for carpenter's tools. You can build a simple wooden structure with a DC 10, design a complex wooden structure with a DC 15, find a weak point in a wooden wall with a DC 15, and pry apart a door with a DC 20. Next, we have the cartographer's tools, which are really cool, but for the sake of time, I will skip today. Next, I want to talk about the cobbler's tools. And I especially like these ones like cobbler's tools, where at first glance, you might think that would be completely useless to an adventurer, but they figure out ways to make it useful, which I really dig. Although the cobbler's trade might seem too humble for an adventurer, a good pair of boots will see a character across rugged wilderness and through deadly dungeons. Components. Cobbler's tools consist of a hammer, an awl, a knife, a shoe stand, a cutter, spare leather, and thread. So here's how you could use it with various skills, arcana and/or history. Your knowledge of shoes aids you in identifying the magical properties of enchanted boots or the history of such items. Investigation. Footwear holds a surprising number of secrets. You can learn where someone has recently visited by examining the wear and the dirt that has accumulated on their shoes. Your experience in repairing shoes makes it easier for you to identify where damage might come from. So here's some things you can do with your cobbler's tools if you're proficient. Maintain shoes. As part of a long rest, you can repair your companion's shoes. For the next 24 hours, up to 6 creatures of your choice who wear shoes you worked on can travel up to 10 hours a day instead of 8 without making saving throws to avoid exhaustion. Now that's pretty cool. Craft hidden compartment. With 8 hours of work, you can add a hidden compartment to a pair of shoes. The compartment can hold an object up to 3 inches long and 1 inch wide and deep. You make an intelligence check using your tool proficiency to determine the intelligence investigation check DC needed to find the compartment. And then we have a couple examples for things you can do with cobbler's tools. Determine a shoe's age and origin, DC 10, and find a hidden compartment in a boot heel, DC 15. Next, we have cook's utensils. One of my favorites. My character actually has proficiency in the brewer's tools and the cook's utensils, both of which I'm excited to use now that I know more of what I can do with them. Adventuring is a hard life. With a cook along on the journey, your meals will be much better than the typical mix of hardtack and dried fruit. Components. Cook's utensils include a metal pot, knives, forks, a stirring spoon, and a ladle. So here are some ways you could use your cook's utensils with various skill checks. History. Your knowledge of cooking techniques allows you to assess the social patterns involved in a culture's eating habits. Medicine. When administering treatment, you can transform medicine that is bitter or sour into a pleasing concoction. Survival. When foraging for food, you can make do with ingredients you scavenge that others would be unable to transform into nourishing meals. And now your cool thing you can do with cook's utensils: prepare meals. As part of a short rest, you can prepare a tasty meal that helps your companions regain their strength. You and up to 5 creatures of your choice regain 1 extra hit point per hit die spent during a short rest, provided you have access to your cook's utensils and sufficient food. So that is pretty sweet. So now with cook's utensils, we have some example DCs for you. Create a typical meal, DC 10. Duplicate a meal, DC 10. Spot poison or impurities in food, DC 15. And create a gourmet meal, DC 15. All right, next we have disguise kit, forgery kit, gaming set, glass blowers tools, which for the sake of time, I will skip. Let's talk next about the herbalism kit. Proficiency with an herbalism kit allows you to identify plants and safely collect their useful elements. Components. An herbalism kit includes pouches to store herbs, clippers and leather gloves for collecting plants, a mortar and pestle, and several glass jars. Here's how you can use herbalism with some various skills. Arcana. Your knowledge of the nature and uses of herbs can add insight to your magical studies that deal with plants and your attempts to identify potions. Investigation. When you inspect an area overgrown with plants, your proficiency can help you pick out details and clues that others might miss. Medicine. Your mastery of herbalism improves your ability to treat illnesses and wounds by augmenting your methods of care with medicinal plants. Nature and survival. When you travel in the wild, your skill in herbalism makes it easier to identify plants and spot sources of food that others might overlook. So something special you can do with the herbalism kit is identify plants. You can identify most plants with a quick inspection of their appearance and smell. And then some sample DCs with the herbalism kit. You can find plants with a DC 15 and identify poison with a DC 20. Next, we have jeweler's tools, which I'll skip for issues of time. And next we have land and water vehicles. Now this is one I was really interested in because I've actually made a few player characters with the land vehicle proficiency just because I thought it made sense for the character, but I often wondered how that could ever be really useful in play, and indeed they've found some ways to make it useful. Proficiency with land vehicles covers a wide range of options from chariots and howdahs to wagons and carts. Proficiency with water vehicles covers anything that navigates waterways. Proficiency with vehicles grants the knowledge needed to handle vehicles of that type, along with knowledge of how to repair and maintain them. In addition, a character proficient with water vehicles is knowledgeable about anything a professional sailor would be familiar with, such as information about the sea and islands, tying knots, and assessing weather and sea conditions. So here's how you can use these proficiencies with various skill proficiencies, starting with Arcana. When you study a magic vehicle, this tool proficiency aids you in uncovering lore or determining how the vehicle operates. Investigation and/or perception. When you inspect a vehicle for clues or hidden information, your proficiency aids you in noticing things that others might miss. Vehicle handling. So this is your special thing with the vehicle proficiency. When piloting a vehicle, you can apply your proficiency bonus to the vehicle's armor class and saving throws. How cool is that? That's awesome. We then have some sample DCs for vehicles. Navigate through rough terrain or waters is DC 10. Assess a vehicle's condition is DC 15. And take a tight corner at high speed is DC 20. Next, we have some more tools that I won't go into detail on, but we've got information on leatherworkers' tools, masons' tools, musical instruments, navigators' tools, painters' supplies, poisoner's kit, potter's tools, and then we have the smith's tools. Smith's tools allow you to work metal, heating it to alter its shape, repair damage, or work raw ingots into useful items. Components are hammers, tongs, charcoal, rags, and a whetstone. So here's how you can use your smith's tools with some skills, Arcana and History. Your expertise lends you additional insight when examining metal objects such as weapons. Investigation. You can spot clues and make deductions that others might overlook when an investigation involves armor, weapons, or other metalwork. And then your special thing you can do with smith's tools is repair. With access to your tools in an open flame hot enough to make metal pliable, you can restore 10 hit points to a damaged metal object for each hour of work. And then we have some sample DCs for smith's tools. Sharpen a dull blade is DC 10. Repair a suit of armor is DC 15. And sunder a non-magical metal object is DC 15. So that's pretty cool stuff. And you know, this would be really cool if you want some more realism in your campaign to start at times when it's appropriate doing damage to metal objects like weapons and armor that the player characters have. And then either a player character or an NPC with the smith tools proficiency can then make those repairs. And that'd be a great and easy way to add a little more realism into your campaign. Also, personally, I would use the DC of 15 that we're given to repair a suit of armor as a DC to resize a suit of armor. So, you know, unless it's magical, if you find armor in a treasure hoard, it's probably not going to fit your character and you're going to need it resized. And I'd say if it's a bigger shift, like maybe you have armor that was made for a human and you're trying to make it fit an elf or a dwarf, I'd probably increase that DC to 20 personally. All right, next we have Thieves' Tools. Perhaps the most common tools used by adventurers, Thieves' Tools are designed for picking locks and foiling traps. Proficiency with the tools also grants you a general knowledge of traps and locks. Components. Thieves' Tools include a small file, a set of lock picks, a small mirror mounted on a metal handle, a set of narrow-bladed scissors, and a pair of pliers. History. So here's how you can use Thieves' Tools with a history check. Your knowledge of traps grants you insight when answering questions about locations that are renowned for their traps. Investigation and perception. You gain additional insight when looking for traps because you have learned a variety of common signs that betray their presence. Set a trap. Just as you can disable traps, you can also set them. As part of a short rest, you can create a trap using items you have on hand. The total of your check becomes the DC for someone else's attempt to discover or disable the trap. The trap deals damage appropriate to the materials used in crafting it, such as poison or a weapon, or damage equal to half the total of your check, whichever the DM deems is appropriate. So some sample DCs, actually they don't give us sample DCs. They have pick a lock and disable a trap, which both have variable DCs based on the lock or the trap. So I really like how they explain here that although any character could conceivably notice a trap with a perception check, someone proficient with Thieves' Tools is going to know more about that trap and get more information. I really like that. We then have Tinker's Tools, Weaver's Tools, and Woodcarver's Tools. Woodcarver's tools allow you to craft intricate objects from wood, such as wooden tokens or arrows. So notice this is different than carpentry. Carpentry is building large wooden structures, where wood carving is dealing with smaller wooden objects. Components. Woodcarver's tools consist of a knife, a gouge, and a small saw. And here's how you could use it with various skills, arcana and or history. Your expertise lends you additional insight when you examine wooden objects, such as figurines or arrows. Nature. Your knowledge of wooden objects gives you some added insight when you examine trees. And some things you can do as Woodcarver's tools are repair. As part of a short rest, you can repair a single damaged wooden object. Craft arrows. As part of a short rest, you can craft up to 5 arrows. As part of a long rest, you can craft up to 20. You must have enough wood on hand to produce them. And then we have some sample DCs for Woodcarver's tools. Craft a small wooden figurine is DC 10, and craft an intricate pattern in wood is DC 15. So there you go. We've made it through our section on tool proficiencies in Xanathar's guide, and I didn't go through everything, but I think I hit some of the highlights and some of my favorites, and I think is enough to show you what they're doing here. And the ones I didn't go over are developed just as well as the ones that I did, and they're really cool. And a common theme that I'm seeing in Xanathar's guide is not only are we given more mechanical toys to play with as far as abilities and subclasses and spells and feats and all that fun stuff, but we're also being given a lot of ways to flesh out our characters, whether those are player characters or non-player characters. And these tool proficiencies are just one of those such ways, because I think players are going to be more willing now to choose tool proficiencies when they have that as an option, because now we have more of an idea of what you can do with those, and it's a little less in the realm of DM fiat, so you can, as a player, have some idea what you're getting for this thing that you're buying, which I think will encourage players to use them more. And I think players using tool proficiencies more and selecting them during character creation is good for all of us, because I think you can see how these various tool proficiencies can really flesh out your character's background and what was your character's life like before you were an adventurer, when you maybe practiced a trade or at least were apprenticed in a trade. And it's really cool stuff. And there is so much in this book to help you flesh out your characters, player or non-player. So if you haven't checked out Xanathar's Guide, I highly, highly recommend it. Will be out everywhere. It's out right now in select game stores, but will be available everywhere on November 21st, including Amazon. And if you are going to get your Xanathar's Guide on Amazon, I would ask you to please head on over to the show notes of this episode at starwalkerstudios.com and click on my link to Amazon for Xanathar's Guide. That's a referral link, and you're not going to have to pay any more from it. You're still going to pay a lot less than you'd pay a lot of places for it, but it will help out Star Walker Studios and Game Master's Journey. And you can buy whatever you want on Amazon after clicking that link, and it all helps us out. So thank you very much for that. So what do you think about all this? I would love to hear from you what you think of what Wizards has done with these tool proficiencies. Are you as excited about this as I am? I'm personally really excited about this from both the player and the Dungeon Master perspective. As a player, I'm really looking forward to all the things I can do with these tool proficiencies now, and kind of rounding out my character with them, and we'll have a lot of fun in role playing with that. And as a Dungeon Master, I'm really excited to see what the players do with these, and I think it's going to lead to some great role playing and some scenes being played out in our games that might never have happened otherwise. So I'm super stoked about these tool proficiencies. I can't wait to see them in play. All right, well, that is going to wrap it up for episode 189 of Game Master's Journey. If you'd like to get a hold of me, you can email me at gamemastersjourney@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter at LexStarwalker. You can also call the Game Master's Journey voicemail number and leave me a message. If your question or feedback is entertaining or enlightening, or both, you might even hear your message on the show. That number is 951-GMJ-LEX1. That's 951-465-5391. If you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions for future topics, I would love to hear from you. You can find the show notes for this episode at starwalkerstudios.com/Game Master's Journey, as well as links to connect with the Game Master's Journey community on Google Plus and Discord, where you can share ideas, questions, and stories with other listener GMs. If you'd like to support the show, the best way you can help us out is by becoming a patron. You can find out all about becoming a patron at patreon.com/StarwalkerStudios. Check the bottom of the show notes for all the other ways you can support the show, including purchasing a t-shirt or my D&D Adventure to the Trickster's Labyrinth at StarwalkerStudios.com. You can also use my Amazon referral link when you shop on Amazon. You can find all these ways to support the show and more at StarwalkerStudios.com/support. I hope that you have a chance to play your favorite RPG this week. I hope you have a chance to run your favorite RPG. I'll be back soon with another episode of Game Master's Journey. Until then, game on.
This has been a Starwalker Studios production, your source for quality gaming and hobby podcasts.
This episode's music, courtesy of Cloudwalker, Transboy, Renfield, Stanko, and Ish. See the show notes for more details at starwalkerstudios.com/Game Master's Journey.